Thank you, Wade, and thank you to all of the panelists. I guess my goal is to try to solicit discussion from congressional staff people, Senate staff people, on why this is important to you. U.S. domestic policies have been have more consequences for the United States. U.S. policies have consequences for the perception and the reality of our international standing and the respect we engender abroad. U.S. policies have consequences for our ability to insist that other countries implement human rights values and norms, some of which are enshrined in treaties to which we are a party. The United States cannot afford to project a complacency about its own human rights abuses while officially encouraging other nations to improve their record and pressing them for greater openness and transparency. That is a recipe for undermining our credibility. As former Yale Law School dean and now legal advisor to the State Department, Harold Koh, said, if our international allies have no assurance that we're actually going to keep our word, then they have much less incentive to keep their word and when they're being obliged to do something. And the U.S. intervention there or in Egypt, to understand that it's not just important for us to talk the talk, but also for us to walk the walk at home. So, in my view, it's long past time for the United States to match its human rights rhetoric with concrete domestic policies and actions and create a human rights culture in our Constitution and Bill of Rights. And as a little legal, perfectly congruent with our ethics law gift, we have copies of the Constitution and Bill of Rights for you to take with you. All of our groups are in agreement that the President needs to issue an executive order creating instruments. We've been working vigorously on that issue. All of the people put in place a transparent and robust mechanism to ensure the effective implementation and follow-up on recommendations made by human rights bodies such as on the elimination of racial discrimination and the UN Human Rights Council. Not only does the United States need a much more robust and formal infrastructure for assuring its own compliance to human rights norms and treaties, it also needs to ratify, as Christina said, CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and the Disability Rights Treaty, known as the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. As part of the UPR process, I think Wade probably mentioned, we were privileged to host in February of 2010 a convening of non-governmental organizations, nonprofits who work on human rights issues from all around the nation. So that happened last February. And then all of us were privileged to go to Geneva last November to hear the United States for the first time submit its report on its efforts to strengthen human rights commitments and comply with international human rights standards. So where did it go? Well, the U.S. report correctly acknowledged the need for improvement in several key areas, including racial justice, women's rights, LGBT and disability rights, and discrimination against Muslims and Americans of South Asian and Arab descent. However, the report neglected to address other key areas where the U.S. has failed to meet its human rights obligations, including felon disenfranchisement, inhumane prison conditions, flaws and racial disparities in the imposition of the death penalty, human rights abuses in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, the militarization of the U.S.-Mexico border, and the broken and inhumane immigration detention system. While the report reiterated the Obama administration's commitment to close Guantanamo, it defended the use of discredited military commissions and to try terrorism suspects' rights. You will get tons of reports and information about the United States' domestic and international human rights record. The other thing that we decided to do in our Washington legislative office that I direct, we have decided to international treaty bodies in the Washington office who have at least some component of their work on human rights issues. At least 4 of us work on human rights issues. So one example of how this is relevant to the work of Hill staff people is on the whole issue of immigration reform. Guatemala, Bolivia, and Mexico, among several other states, expressed their serious concerns about racial profiling in relation to immigration enforcement issues. The U.S. delegation assured the Council that it condemns racial and ethnic profiling in all of its forms and claimed to be conducting a thorough review of policies and procedures to ensure that none of its law enforcement practices improperly target individuals based on race and ethnicity. And that is a great overstatement on the part of the United States. There have been several Inspector General reports showing how the United States border control policies use race as a factor to determine who's deported and who's pulled aside. The United States has increased to 71 the number of local law enforcement agencies that now enforce federal immigration laws. And I could go on, but I see that my time is up. So I think it would be in our enlightened mutual interest if more and more congressional offices saw these international human rights monitoring bodies as an opportunity to pursue the legislative agendas and the human rights policies that need repair in the United States. We can no longer take the view of U.S. exceptionalism. We can no longer say human rights treaties apply to all of you outside of the United States and they don't apply to us inside of the United States. So the ACLU and the groups at this table are committed to working with you to make our policies and our practices more in line, not just with our Constitution, Bill of Rights, and many civil and human rights statutes, but also more in line with what we preach to other nations abroad. Thank you very much.